Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about, Turbo's analysis, where Turbo stands, where we're at in the rankings for Turbo, and what I expect for this coin over the next coming weeks. Now, yesterday at the end of my video, I did say, look, hypothetically, there could be a little bit of a sell-off, forming. And to be honest, this type of structure, I've seen it a million times where, under the right context, especially during, bearish momentum, it would have been perfect. I did say yesterday, look, we were also creating higher and higher lows. So, it was a 50-50. My trade personally hit break even overnight because we did have this little bit of a sell off, put it at break even, and then like 2 hours later, 3 hours later, I got hit break even. And then you can see, bam, we're going up. So, look, overall, right, the fact that there is a bullish movement during a big bullish candle isn't the most surprising, but in a way it is because the market actually kind of sold off for many coins. So we can see here even some of the coins that we hold and talk about on this channel consistently: -4%, -1.5, -2, -3, Myro -12. Myro is kind of like up and down, but -4%, a couple 4%. So Turbo is holding its own very nicely compared to a bunch of other coins. And this coin, there's no other way to say it, but has been dominating the markets. Okay. It has been dominating other cryptos as we speak. Literally, if I go to, even something like all the crypto, right? I go to all the crypto and we go to the growth for the top 200 coins for the last 7 days. Turbo is literally number one. And we were what, at 120%, 130, and we shot up to 160%. I remember Deep was like at 90%. So this coin, it has gone up and officially, entered the triple digits for amount of gains in the last week. So, congrats to those that are holding Deep. But look, seriously, only two coins in the top 200, right? Not only that, but we have been climbing up the ranks. We're 136th in the world. At one point, just a couple weeks ago, we were at like what, 288, 280. And all of a sudden, within a week, ladies and gentlemen, yes, the last 2 weeks before that, we were slowly climbing up, but within pretty much just a short period, we're in the top 150. So very impressive. Volume is still great for a Saturday. I mean, this was Saturday's volume, right? This coin is not slowing down. We're almost back to 400 million market cap. It looks absolutely, delightful. And this is what I expect from this coin, right? This is what I expect. And, before we do talk about something very important, I do want to compare us to other coins. But before we do, right, I just want to see the holders. So we can see we are continuing to climb in holders. The bandwagon is still here, and the bandwagon will continue to come to Turbo. Before you know it, probably 3 days later or whatever the case, we're probably going to hit like 54,000 holders. So it's going to look very nice. So look, one thing I do want to talk about, right, before we dive into charts, if we go to meme coins, actually, we can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with is 9, 10, 11, 12, 13th. We are the 13th coin. I did say, right, this cycle, I believe, will end in the top 10. And look, obviously, Turbo had a fantastic week. Now, do I expect this type of pump every single week? No, only maybe during altcoin season when we are going to peak at the very end and then die off, right? But look, man, we have overtaken certain meme coins, even Milena coin that should be, kind of, being pumped up there. And look, we do have some other coins that we have to contend with and, fight for the top 10 spot. But I think it's very possible, right? I think it's very possible. There are certain coins that are going to give us a little bit of a headache. But I think something like Ape Coin, we can definitely go past, which would make us 12th. And then these other coins are very, very doable, right? SPX, Pengu, Brett, and maybe Whiff. I mean, Solana's kind of meta, right? But these three, Floki and Whiff, all these five right here, even Fartcoin are seriously coins that we're going to have a either 50-50 chance with, a great chance, and maybe debatably one of these, maybe Fartcoin, we might be an underdog to, right? But even then, right, if we just beat three of them, we are going to be top 10. And I think that's very, very possible, especially that Ethereum, right? Ethereum will shine, right? You got to remember, Ethereum did pump a good amount, a decent amount, in the last week, right? We did, post these trades in the Discord. They absolutely smashed. We talked about it, right? So if you would have put $100, we would have got, $400 from this. So exactly what we expected, because we're consolidating here. And then, there was a big, big, nice zone here where obviously we took profits. But look, all right, Ethereum did go up a good amount, right? We won't lie about that, or you know, 16.5%, right? 16.5%, probably what? 18% at one point, 20%. So Ethereum pumped 20%. So a decent pump for Ethereum, but the reality is Ethereum still the bottoms. You got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, I believe something like Ethereum will be climbing up at the bare minimum past the all-time highs. So I expect Ethereum to, at least hit like 5,000, 5,500. And that's like worst case scenario. But with more liquidity coming to the markets, my initial Ethereum rough estimate was it's going to be around $8,000 to $10,000. Now, of course, if we get more money than expected, altcoin season is going to be genuinely the biggest it's ever going to be, and everybody just goes all out, all the countries, everything. We could see Ethereum even go up to 15K, right? But I am not gonna be, I'm gonna be more conservative about it. So look, you got to remember, Ethereum is at the end of the day a number two coin. And you're probably wondering, well, why are you mentioning something like Ethereum? Well, because, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the Ethereum chain. So when Ethereum does good, we will do good, just naturally speaking. Okay. When Ethereum, starts slacking off and, doing mediocre, it does affect our performance too, right? Ethereum can still have a mediocre week, and Turbo can have a great week. Okay. That is true, okay? But when the stars align, when Ethereum has a great week, Turbo will have a great week, especially if Bitcoin also has a great week. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, this is perfect, because you have to realize that, generally speaking, something like Bitcoin pumps and then it cycles out, right? Let's say Bitcoin tops at 140, 150K, doesn't matter. And then Ethereum has its moment to shine, right? Ethereum pumping up will mean Turbo will pump up a lot. And obviously, since Bitcoin pumped a lot, and then at that point, Bitcoin dominance price starts dropping, we're going to be seeing nice effects. And then, right, once we go from some of the big coins like Ethereum and some other coins that get pumped, that's when other coins, altcoins like Turbo, Render, AKT, whatever we cover on this channel, and probably a bunch of other coins too, that's when they also start peaking. So, it's going to be like a double positive. Obviously, everyone benefits from Bitcoin, pretty much going up, but then Ethereum will have its nice and shining moment, which will really, really pump our coin, which then, ladies and gentlemen, once the official altcoin season happens, we're probably going to be from the start to mid transition. Once we really, start pumping away with official altcoin season, we are going to be seeing new levels of Turbo that no one could have imagined, which is why, I'm super, super high on this coin. And even just coins like Solana, Solana coins will probably do good too. But, we know Ethereum, despite it underperforming this year, still will get lots of love. And the crazy thing is, ladies and gentlemen, right? With Ethereum underperforming, we still pretty much hit a billion market cap. Look at the adventure we started with and where we're at right now, right? We started all the way over here, practically 2 years ago, right? Then 2023, 2024, we really, really rose, and then sell off, most coins. I mean, every coin pretty much sold off. So it's not a Turbo problem. And then we can see we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if this was a Turbo problem, Turbo wouldn't have recovered, right? That is just the reality. But anyways, enough yap. Let's talk about next week. So look, if overall the markets are going to be more sideways, right? Overall, more sideways, and there's not going to be a really big decline. We talked about Bitcoin possibly going down to like 90, 91K, which was what, 5.5%, which means Turbo. Yeah, even if Turbo crashes 23%, look, this may be very well the new relevant range. And, that could be a big, big reality. So, right now, we are retesting off of these zones. Now, I don't think this zone will hold. I do think personally, if we do hold this area, right, we will be consolidating more or less here and eventually do something like this. Look, Turbo is extremely, extremely bullish, right? I always expect a little bit of a correction. Even if it is just for literally 1 or 2 days, right? 1 or 2 days can just be like red, then sideways for 2 days, and then the following week we could just be already back to super high levels. But look, this can be a reality. We might not even get a retest back to here. Okay, we might not get a retest back to here. So for those that have a little bit of FOMO, I understand, right? At the end of the day, I don't influence the markets. I simply, tell you what I see. And we had a peak recently. We tried selling off, no success for 2 days, and then the next day on Saturday, out of all days, we actually pumped higher, and the candle closes beautiful. So if Sunday ends pretty weak, I do expect a little bit of a pullback for next week. I really, really do. But like I said, if we are going to be fairly strong with Bitcoin and other coins, and this turbo momentum just continues to smash, we might not get this big fundamental pullback. We might come back down to, like I said, 0.004 area, and it might be enough because there is also structure over here. So it's not just a coincidence that it comes back down here and not further, because there is structure to support this, and that may be enough. So next week, if we do go down, right, if we just have a little bit of a correction, a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of a pullback, which is healthy, by the way, which is healthy, I'm all for it. Listen, we are going to pump regardless. We're going to get to where we have to get to. Some corrections, a little bit of pullback are normal, but if we do just get to these levels, buying at 0.0041 might be the play, right? Remember, you had weeks to buy down here. Remember, you don't always have to try to get the best price. And so, to be honest, even just in this zone over here, you did have about, 2 months or so, 2.5 months. So, you know, that is just the name of the game. But look, ladies and gentlemen, overall, this coin is absolutely killing it. Nothing new from Turbo from what I've seen. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.